This session is a very dear and important session, not only for all of us, but for me personally as a proud and unapologetically proud Afro-Latino. It's a topic called Latinx intersectionality, a workplace for all. We're going to be talking about the intersectionalities within our Latino community and how corporate America should make sure that we create a workplace that's inclusive for all of us, including our Latinx community, as well as our intersectionalities. I want to first acknowledge the American Petroleum Institute for your support of this session. A big thanks to API, who's been a longtime partner of HACR and our mission of advancing Hispanic inclusion. So thank you, API, for your support. I also want to thank Marriott International, who has also been a longtime support, and Marriott has shared a video which I'd like for all of you to see, and please see this video from our partner, Marriott International. All right, great. Thank you, Marriott International, for your support and your longtime partnership with HACR. And also, again, thank you to API. So let's get started on Latinx intersectionality, a workplace for all. To moderate our panel, please welcome HACR's very own Alida Minkel. She is our data analytics manager, and she will moderate our session. Alida.
Hi, thank you, Sid. As Sid mentioned, I am HACR's data analytics manager, and I'm really looking forward to today's session where we'll be learning tips on creating and evaluating tools and policies designed to support an intersectional workforce. We have a great panel for you today. I am joined by Enna Jimenez, the Senior Director and Head of Quality Assurance at IDEMIA, and Angela Arboleda, Senior Director of Federal Government Affairs at Altria. So welcome both.
Hola, thank you.
I'm going to let these wonderful panelists tell you a little bit about themselves first, though. So Enna, you want to start us off? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation to be part of the HACR conference today. So Enna Jimenez, born in Puerto Rico. My parents are from the Dominican Republic. I've been in the United States now for over 40 years. And I live in Boston, Mass. I will say that I've been in technology now for 30 years, working in all kinds of industries, really focused on the quality assurance within an IT aspect. And currently today I work at IDEMIA, which is an organization that focuses on identity of individuals. So we do everything from TSA PreCheck to law enforcement software that is used to identify citizens. And I head up their quality assurance department. And it's super exciting to be here today.
Thank you for joining us. Angela?
Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Arboleda. I work for Altria Client Services. I am a lobbyist in the federal affairs shop. I started my career as an activist in civil rights. I worked for lots of women's organizations, unions. I cut my teeth working at Unidos, formerly known as the National Council of La Raza. Then I worked for Senator Harry Reid in the Senate for 7 years, and then I transferred to corporate America. And this is my second job in corporate America. I've been at Altria Client Services it's going to be 2 years in December. I've known HACR for years and years, and it is through the leadership of Sid that HACR really has gone to a different level. So thank you, HACR, for everything you do, and thank you, Sid, for your leadership.
Yes, I will second that Sid shout out as well. Well, first, let's start off with a bit of storytelling that will kind of set the stage for this conversation. So I was hoping you guys would be willing to share an example of a time when a workplace policy or practice supported two or more personal identities, or your intersecting identities, right, that affect how you show up in the workplace. And, why do you remember this, and what did that experience mean for you?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I have to set up the context so that, because before things got better, things were a little bit not so good. So I was pregnant with my first child. I was working for Senator Reid. And I went into the office and I said, Senator, I want to tell you that I'm pregnant and I have really good news to share with you. And the first thing he said was, oh, I'm so excited for you. He's a Mormon, and family and kids are very, very important for him. So I knew that wasn't going to be a problem, even though I was in his leadership team and I was going to have maternity leave, et cetera, et cetera. But I knew it was going to be positive. But then the next questions that he asked me was, so what does your husband do? And I cringed a little. And I said, well, Senator, I don't have a husband. I have a wife. And without skipping a beat, he said, well, so how did you do it? Where did you get it? The senator is known for just speaking out things and blurting out. And sometimes things come out in a kind of funny way. So I said, well, I did IVF and, we went through the whole system and the whole program, and the protocol was long and hard, and here we are. And so he's like, well, perfect. I'm excited about it. You take care of yourself, make sure that you do everything you need to do. The most important thing is family. So fast forward to the question that Alida just had for us. So I was supported in the sense that I was given maternity leave. I was without any problem or qualm. The senator was very supportive that I was a lesbian, having a kid with another woman, all of that. But we did have to go through that kind of like breaking the ice moment. And that was a little bit, jarring. I didn't realize that he didn't know that I was LGBT. And so that was, that was a funny example. But my workplace was very, very supportive of me and my wife having the baby and having maternity leave and all of that. So that was great.
Yeah, well, I'm really sorry you had to go through that. Couldn't have been pleasant, but I am glad that it worked out in the end for you, and that you at least got the structural support that you needed.
It was a little funny, but yes, a little jarring.
Yeah. Anna?
Yes, absolutely. So, I think for the most part, I've always had positive experiences at my companies, and always been really embraced for who I am. I think, early on in my career, people would look at me and they would say, okay, you're Black, and so we're going to invite you to all these events where we're kind of focused on the Black community. And that was fine, because obviously I consider myself Black and Latina. But it was interesting how there were moments where I wasn't being included in the events that were Latina. And so that's where I had to kind of be very intentional about making sure that people knew that I wasn't just Black, but that I was also a Latina employee. And so there was this one time in one of the companies a long time ago where there was this huge event, huge celebration, where they were bringing in all of the Latina women in the group to kind of be celebrated and to talk about what their highlights and what the things that they were doing. And I was left out. Which was shocking, because people knew, certain people knew that I was Latina. And of course, it took me to kind of go up and ask a couple of people, hey, I'm hearing that this is an event for Latina. Why am I not being included? Is it senior leaders only? Like, what's the criteria? And after talking to several folks, they were like, oh my God, we didn't realize, I'm so sorry. And I was included in the event. But it was one of those where certain folks that were putting on the event did not realize that I was also Latina, because when they look at me, they say I'm Black. And so that was sort of my story. And that's why I'm always making sure that people know I'm a Latina, and I make it clear so that as events and things come up, I can ensure that I'm included.
You bring up a good point, Enna, about how, even when intersectionality is kind of discussed in the mainstream, it's not always super inclusive, right? And so I'm going to preface my next question by, pointing out that the concept of intersectionality is not necessarily new, and does have a history of use in the legal space dating back to, the late 1970s. But that doesn't mean that every issue surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been approached with an intersectional lens. And you were just giving that example of how people saw you as a Black woman, but not necessarily as an Afro-Latina woman, right? Mm-hmm. And so what issues have been historically left out of discussions on intersectionality, and how would corporate America benefit from recognizing their shared or overlapping concerns?
That's a great question. And yes, I think that there is a lot that corporate America would be able to benefit from. I've worked in a number of kind of companies, whether it's banking or educational, and I'm in IT. And IT, as people know, is predominantly white males that are in that industry. And so growing up in that industry, it was important to make sure that we had diversity of thought in the room, and that we understood who the market was that we were trying to market to. And so that's why I'm always talking about the fact that when you don't have the right people in the room, you don't have the right voices. And then how do you know that you're catering to the right customer that you're trying to reach? We definitely do need to do a lot in that space. I think that companies miss an opportunity when they don't have the right individuals. And sometimes you get the, oh my God, but we hired a Latina. And their version of hiring a Latina is a white Latina or someone that's from Mexico, because their lens is so small that that's all they're thinking about. And so our job and our role needs to be to expand that. You can have both white and Black Latinos who are from the Caribbean or from Brazil or anywhere, right? And it's about expanding that viewpoint so that they can have an expanded conversation.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that there has been an awakening or a reckoning in corporate America about the importance of diversity and inclusion. And to be honest with you, it's been going on for years, and it's in part due to organizations like HACR, who have been pushing their surveys and asking the tough questions, who is on your board, who's on the C-suite, how are you building the pipeline? All of those questions are really important. And I think that finally corporate America is starting to really pay attention and be purposeful. So years back, corporate America was saying the right things. So, we need diversity, we need inclusion, not just women, but Latinos and Blacks, and then different intersectionalities, LGBT with Latino or Black, whatever. But it was all talk, and it was really not a lot of implementation. I think things have changed. I've seen a difference in the past, I want to say 5 years or so, where there is a much more intentional searches at all different levels, from C-suite down. And I want to echo what Enna said, which is it is absolutely crucial to have diversity throughout, because it's not just having the Latino or the Black or the LGBT point of view. Is really understanding how the message of the company, the message of the organization, or whatever it is understood by those communities, how it's received. And so when I'm very, very fortunate to work in a very diverse team of people at Altria. And my boss was the first one to understand and realize that I had not just the Latina box to check, but I was also a lesbian. I've also cut my teeth in civil rights and criminal justice policy. And there is all this intersectionality. So you have to be open and honest about all of the different pieces that you bring into the workplace, so that they understand the full scope. I'm bilingual. I do criminal justice. I do civil rights. I can weigh in on voting issues. There is a lot more than just, Latina. Okay, let's have her check our, Spanish language website, which, by the way, was what Latinos were used to do back in the day, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point about how, having intention is great, right? We want to bring on more Black women, we want to bring on more Latinas, whatever. But if you don't have the formalized structures in place to support that, and then also create an environment where people want to stay there and feel welcome and open to be there, you're not going to get very far, right, as an organization. So, to that, what are some common policies and practices or conditions that need to be stopped, remodeled, or rescinded entirely to better support an intersectional workplace? And I guess, what are the basic practices do you see many organizations lacking that need to be in place in order to support an intersectional environment?
Well, intentionality is the first one, right? Putting the pieces in place is very important, but it's also a cultural shift. You have to be purposeful. And so when you bring a Latina or an African American or someone with mixed backgrounds, intersectional backgrounds, there needs to be a conversation with the team about the value that this person's perspective brings to the table. And the team needs to understand that this person brings a unique set of talents, viewpoints, connections that really were lacking among the team. So it is building a culture of inclusion. It is not just hiring the person, because Alida, you're absolutely right. Just hiring someone and dropping them in the middle of a team that is not welcoming and does not understand the importance of having diverse views and diversity of opinions, it's not going to work. So I would say intentionality, recruitment, but also cultural shift and a conversation about why is it important to have diversity. Those are 3 very key, very easy things to do, but very hard things to do at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. Enna?
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct, Angela. I totally agree with you. In addition to that, I think that you really have to sort of think about diversity across your whole organization. How are we training our folks? There's the, unconscious bias training is something that companies should have in their handbook. All employees should go through that, but more especially your managers, those that are hiring, right? We need to break down these walls, these theories that you can't hire anyone for any role because, or you can't hire certain people because they don't have the experience or the expertise. Those are the type of things that we need to break down, and companies need to do their job or do a better job at training their hiring managers. Look, I spend a lot of time hiring and interviewing people, and you know, there's a number of things that I do in that process. First, I'm talking to my suppliers, and I'm working with my company to ensure that we have a vast amount of different suppliers. And my question is, what does your candidate pool looks like? And sometimes they stumble because they're not expecting that question, but I make sure that they give me an answer. I want to know how many people in your pool are people of color. How many, Blacks you have, how many Latinos you have. And based on that, I'm going to decide whether I'm going to work with you or not, because I know who I'm looking to hire. I know who I want to have that interview with. And so it's up to us who are in these positions of hiring to be able to push back on our procurement and our talent team and say, no, we're not going with the status quo. We want to make sure that we have a diverse candidate pool, and it's your job to make sure that we have the right vendors that will bring that to us. So that is definitely an area that I think that companies need to continue to do better, along with just supplier diversity, right? We know so many small businesses that are growing and that can service our companies in so many different ways. And so another area that we need to really focus on is diversifying our supplier pool of vendors.
Yeah, you actually bring up also, again, you guys are queens, bring up really great points here, but you bring up a great point about support for management, right? So a lot of research, has shown that, a lot of diversity and inclusion policies and practices tend to stagnate a little bit at the middle management level. And it's not because middle management doesn't care, right? But it's because they're not necessarily always provide the structural support needed, right? And ERGs can, kind of help in and step with that. Step in there, right? So, this year in our CII report, we found that, in 2020, companies really pulled back on involving their ERGs pretty much across the board in their diversity inclusion practices. And so I would like to ask you guys, how do you think that ERGs specifically can support or advocate for more intersectional approaches to corporate practices, policies, and, cultural development?
Yeah, well, go ahead, Enna.
Sure. I think that there's a lot that we can do from an ERG perspective. Look, I used to be a co-chair of what we call Conexiones, at the Latino ERG at one of the companies that I worked at. And in that role, I had a say, I had power. And sometimes our ERG leaders don't always recognize that. And so we need to use that. We need to also train our ERG leaders. This is a pipeline. It's a pipeline for them to have more visibility within the company. It's a pipeline for them to learn how to speak or do more speaking engagements, learn a lot of different skill sets that they will use, not just in their personal lives, but in their company as well. And so ERGs leaders and your committee members, you have a lot of power. You're able to go through and talk with your business leaders and with your companies and kind of drive or lead the conversation. I'll share with you a quick little story. One of the things that we did when I worked at Wellington Management a number of years ago is we had partnered up with Alpha, and we had this huge big event in the company. And for the first time, now this was me, I was leading the ERG group, and I knew how many people we had registered. And we had, well over 200 people registered for this event. And so for the first time ever, we had 200 attendees at Wellington. And I called the CEO that day and I was like, look, we're going to have a lot of people here at this event. Are you around? Are you available? Can you stay late and stay for this event? And he stayed and he was there. And it was just, after the event, he was like, Enna, oh my God, I didn't realize how many Latino professionals in the financial services industry, and the fact that they were all here sitting in our room. It was just an amazing experience. And he was just super ecstatic about that. And that really opened the doors for us to be able to have much more interaction with the talent and recruitment team, with marketing. Talk about how are we marketing to our customers, and specifically to the Latino community. I was able to engage and be involved with these different folks just because of that one event. And then, it also opened doors for us to be much more involved in the Wellington Foundation, because again, us as ERG leaders, we're also in the community. We know our experiences and we know what the community needs. I think it was, funny that my kids, when they were young, they went to this, like a community organization. And when I was at Wellington, I was able to kind of come around full circle to be able to be on the committee that was able to grant them a grant. And so for me, that was like a way of being able to use my community, my own personal sort of experiences, brought that into the company, and then was able to help this organization get some funding. And that's the power that we have as ERG leaders. And we have to sit at the table and we have to just, work with our organizations, with our business leaders to get our voice be heard and to create opportunities for not just the employees, but for our communities as well.
Absolutely agree. ERGs are a pipeline to leadership, a pipeline to different parts of the organization, of the company. I can tell you from my own experience, I worked in a smaller company that did not have ERGs. And now I work in a company that is very well established, that has like 15 ERGs. And it is definitely a sea of difference. As Enna said, it gives an opportunity for Latinos in different departments, of different rank, of different age and experience, to be able to meet each other, but but also to be able to lead the company and show the company the way that we want to be seen as Latinos or as LGBT or as African American or what have you. We have a very active ERG at Altria. The Latino ERG is called C. I'm a part of it. The LGBT ERG is called Mosaic, and I'm also part of it. And it's amazing because I've been able to be a Latina and bring my LGBT experience into C, and be a lesbian and bring my Latino perspective into Mosaic, into the LGBT ERG. So I've been able to be myself in both groups, and both groups have been able to, quite frankly, benefit from my perspective, because I don't only bring the LGBT experience. I do not only bring the Latina experience. And so when we choose speakers, when we choose panels, when we choose activities, there is always that component, that extra turn that we're able to offer, just because there is intersectionality within the groups. But definitely ERGs play a very important role. A lot of people outside corporate America do not realize how important ERGs are, because they don't see them, right? This is internal work. This is the work that the company is doing internally. It's cultural. It is not outward facing, right? So it is not what they're producing. It is not the product. It is not, what's glitzy about it. But really, ERGs are part of the fabric that changes the culture in corporate America. And so I feel like we need to do a better job at really telling the story of the importance of ERGs and the role that ERGs play for diversity and inclusion in each of the companies that they're present.
Yeah,
and
well, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would just add that, one of the things that we as Latinos, sometimes we say, well, we can only be in a certain ERG. So we can only be in the Latino ERG, or the one that you feel you most connect with. But the beauty of this is the fact that you shouldn't feel like you can't be part of all ERGs. And every company that I go to, I join however many ERGs are there, right? Whether it's the parents, of course, the women, everything that's there, I try to be part of it. I was also once co-chair of a disability ERG as an ally. They needed someone to help them, start this ERG group. And because I had done such a good job at some of the other Latino ERG groups that I was in, they asked me to come over and help stand this one up. And so look at this as an opportunity of just, leadership growth. And when your company sees that you are giving in and leaning in and just being part of making sure that there's a better culture for all the employees, is going to create a much better opportunity for you. So absolutely agree with you, Angela. ERGs are pivotal, are important. Everyone should have them. Everyone should be a part of them. And it's hard. It's not easy getting folks to be engaged. Look, I'm in IT. In technology, when you're trying to get folks to come and join all these events, they're like, Enna, we have these deadlines, we have these things we need to do. We don't have time to go to all these events. You know that, Angela, right? And so I was like, come on, this is good. This is going to be great. But you have to continue to remind people the importance of it and why we're doing it, and the fact that when we're all in this together, and that we're all understand what's our culture and how do we, better talk and work with each other, it's going to make us do our job with a bigger smile. You're going to get so much more out of each employee once you recognize what they bring to the table and you allow them to be their true self every single day. And so that's really key.
If I can add just one little example that just came to mind, I was talking to a colleague of mine, and he was white presenting. He had an Anglo name and an Anglo last name, and very technical person. He's a chemist, all of this stuff. He was in our regulatory affairs department. I've never met him, and we got to talking, and turns out that he is Latino. His mom is Latina, and his dad is some, Scandinavian nationality. He really wasn't raised in the Latino experience for whatever reason. And he told me that it was since he's been at Altria, since he's seen the work of the ERGs, that he's been wanting to learn more about his other part of his identity, the other part of his culture. And he actually says that he owes it to the ERGs. And so, I said, you know what? It's never too late. It's never too late to figure out, what pieces of your mom's culture you want to bring in and feel proud about that part of your identity. So even at the personal level, not only at the macro corporate practices and procedures are the ERGs important, but it is also a really great opportunity for people to grow and understand who they are fully.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the culture being important and kind of actually helping you reconnect with your own, right? I know for me, that's definitely been my experience being an employee of HACR, right? But also, I think that is something that companies need to realize, that how influential internal culture can be, not just when people are at work, right? But also outside of work. It can encourage them to explore things that they may not have before. And I want to kind of roll that back a little bit to what you mentioned earlier, Angela, about people not necessarily knowing the work that ERGs are doing, right? And not necessarily know about the resources that may be available to them publicly, but also, our 2021 Empower Her white paper found that there is actually a big gap between the availability of resources and awareness of those resources internally by the employees themselves, especially by the employees who would most benefit from them. And so, what are some things that companies can do to make sure they are communicating the availability of support resources to individuals occupying intersectional spaces?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of sharing and making it much more available, right? Oftentimes you'll get an email, kind of bulletin email. This is all this information. Go out and look for it. But I think companies need to be a bit more intentional. How about if we doing your town hall conversations, or when your CEO is providing some communication, have him also share that, and to let people know that these resources are available to everyone. Plus, I think it's also the job that we all play as employees in the company, right? So where I've seen this work the best is when companies create sort of these group of ambassadors, and they'll bring us in, they'll share with us, this is what we're doing, this is what's happening. These are the new tools that we're putting into place. And then they ask us as well to also be ambassadors of this message and also get it out within the employee. So now it's coming from communication from your CEO, from your top leadership, communication from managers, but now you also have colleagues talking to each other and sharing this information. So those are some of the ways that I think we can improve that.
Angela?
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I think, the website, there needs to be different mechanisms where the word gets out about the role of the ERG, the importance, and not only what we as employees can do for the ERG, but what the ERG can do for us. Mm-hmm. How the ERG is going to give me the opportunity to, and Enna talked about this, grow as a leader, grow as a speaker, maybe be the treasurer of the ERG and learn a little bit about finance. It's not just the employees giving, educating the rest of the company. It's also a good opportunity. Employees need to understand that it's a really good opportunity for career development in a whole host of different spaces and issues.
And one of the things we're seeing now is some of the companies are starting to but sort of provide a bit of an honorarium to employees who are ERG leaders. And this is a new trend. I've heard of a few companies that started to do this. And I think that the more and more organizations start to do that, the more and more people will also want to embrace all of this. It's like, put your, this is important. It's valuable. We as an organization recognize the importance of it. And because of that, we're going to pay you, an additional stipend or an additional bonus at the end of the year, or whatever, way they want to do that for the additional work that you're doing. Because look, all of us that have been ERG leaders, we all know we're doing that above our 40 hours, above our 60, 70 hours that we're putting into the company, right? It's on our time, and we do it because we love it. We do it because we're passionate about it and we like it. And so it's fine. And we want to do it because we want to see the company excel and have a better culture experience for all the employees. But when a company actually puts some dollars behind that, that's when you really know the company is 100% on board. They're like fully in and they're engaged and they get it. So hopefully, more and more companies will start to pick up on that trend. That's what I would love to see.
Yeah, ERG leadership is a full-time job.
It is.
Yeah. Well, we have 10 minutes or so, 7 minutes now before we switch over to audience Q&A, but there are, 2 more questions I would like to make sure that we get to. Specifically, the first one being, what are some of the power dynamics at play that you see as playing a crucial role in halting progress on issues related to DE&I, and how should they be accounted for and addressed?
Well, let me jump in. This is not new for Latinos. I think that we have, and I want to be very careful and very respectful of what I'm going to say, but we have been in the shadow of our African-American brothers and sisters as a community. And I believe in taking turns and taking a seat and honoring the differences between the Latino experience and the African-American experience. However, I think that one of the challenges for DE&I is exactly not playing favorite or setting an equal playing field for all of the ERGs or all of the different identities and all of the different people that work in your company, so that when the conversation about fill in the blank, voting rights or criminal justice or police reform comes up, because all of these issues, even though they're not necessarily the policy issues that pertain to my company, these are issues that we're asked as corporate America to weigh in on, that we are sophisticated enough to be able to give a response that is inclusive, and that the response is not just from a Black African American lens, but that we have the opportunity to really explore the issues of the day from a multicultural perspective. So I think that that's one of the biggest challenges. Sometimes when we talk about diversity and inclusion, people just think, oh, as long as we have the Black voice, the Black experience, done. Well, it's a little bit more complicated, and we're a little bit more multicultural than just Black and white. And so I think that that's one of the biggest barriers. On the positive is that there is much more awareness of what diversity looks like. And so people are aware that they must take into account other points of view, and that the African American experience, even though it's very valid and relevant, it can also be accompanied by other experiences, so that the concept, the message, the whatever it is more cohesive and it's more well-rounded.
You are so correct, Angela. I could not agree with you more. I think that the inclusiveness needs to come in with also including all of our voices. And look, we all know this, right? The Latino we're growing, right? We're the new mainstream economy. Latinos today are the second largest group of voters in the country. We have 74% of new workers. There's so many stats that just shows how Latinos are growing. I think for me, one of the most beautiful stats that I love is when is being able to say that if we were a standalone economy, we would be the 8th largest in the world. Isn't that crazy? Where our GDP is 2.6 trillion. And so all of that to simply say we matter. Right? It's important to have our voices, and it's important that organizations realize that all of their DE&I efforts must include Latinos, and it should not exclude the Latino voice. As you said, Angela, it is a very tricky conversation to have. I'm Black, I'm Latina, so I represent sort of both sides. I fit in both sides, and it's not an either or, right? It's and. Right. And so I think it's important to be able to recognize, and organizations have to be very intentional about not excluding voices as they put on programs, as they're trying to do new things in the organization, as they're trying to innovate, that they realize that the Latino voice is going to be critical. And if they don't start, organizations who are not catering to the Latino community today are going to have a rude awakening a few years from now, right? So because Latino is going to be the largest community out there, and you need to make sure that you are prepared, that your branding is on point. One thing that I cringe at a lot is when I see all these list stuff or all these, great things that people are doing, and it's great, it's amazing. I love seeing Latinos on there, but I kind of like to see people that also look like me. Right? I think that that's also super important. I want to see my Afro-Latinos included in there because I think of my kids who are going to be their role models, right? And so we need to make sure that we are shining the light across the board on all aspects of everything that represents Latinos and Hispanics.
Yeah, that we're shining the light on the intersection of those identities, right? Like you can't just be one or the other, right? You can be multiple and also have connections to both. So Real quick, 1 minute or less, the final question I want to ask to make sure, because I think it would be really beneficial for the audience, is, what do we as individuals need to be vigilant of to ensure that we do not further contribute to marginalizing already marginalized groups and to ensuring that we account for their full inclusion in the workplace?
I mean, I think
I think we've talked about it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think we've talked about it throughout the panel, right? It's being aware of your multifaceted identities and bringing your full self to the workplace, your full self to the table, your full self to the ERGs, your full self to policy discussions. And so we need to do our own internal work to show up in the workplace as our whole self. That's the first thing I would say, because if we do that, then we're setting an example for the rest of our coworkers, for the rest of the department, and ultimately for the corporation.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I think it's just being, I was just kind of talking about it, right? We have to just be intentional. We have to recognize who's out there, who are our consumers, who are we trying to cater to, right? Whether it's internal employees or external employees, or your community in general, right? You just have to be very intentional and very focused in order to make sure that you have the right result that you're trying to get. I think that part of the conversation is look at your marketing, look at your branding, look at how are you communicating. Simple things. Sometimes, there's certain language, and as we know, we say things differently in Mexico than you do from Dominican Republic. Heck, Dominican Republic to Puerto Rico say certain things in different ways. And so we have to be intentional about knowing whom we're communicating to, and that we are our communication is branded and it's in a way that it will hit home to anybody and everyone.
Okay. Well, I'm going to open up to the audience. Our first question is, what can Latinx ERGs do better to celebrate Black History Month, Pride Month, etc., to create a culture of belonging to Afro, Latinx, and Latinx LGBTQIA+?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's really about what's the story. I think of putting together an event for Black History Month, even for Pride Month. The question, though, that the conversation that I would want to have is, what's the story that Latinos play in African American communities? And so be intentional about having those conversations. What do you do? How has Latinos in the past, reacted or handled our LGBTQ community, right? And so those are the conversations that you want to have, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with creating a safe space environment in your organization where you can have these types of conversations. And we need to do a lot more of that. I think we tend to dance around these topics because we're afraid of having the conversation, and we need to be much more intentional. I'll give people a little tidbit. One story that my brother, who is ERG, it follows the family. He's an ERG leader for his Latino ERG, and he ran this trivia game using. You guys may know the show One Day at a Time. He kind of, because they touch on a whole bunch of different topics, but it's a fun show to watch, and it's funny and it's hilarious. And so he showed a clip of that during one of his ERG meetings, and then had a conversation around, what does this mean? How do we internalize and externalize what the meanings of these different topics are? So that's just some samples of things that people can do in your organizations to extend the conversation beyond your normal, let's get together, let's just have fun.
Yeah, okay. Next question. How much of the responsibility to create an inclusive culture for intersectional Latinx employees lies with the company versus the ERG groups?
Do you want to take that one, Angela?
I think that the company has has the burden, to be honest. The company needs to be mature enough and understand the importance of diversity and inclusion enough to support ERGs, to understand the role that they make and to give space for the ERGs. And then the ERGs need to step up, but the ERGs will step up. But there needs to be a space created and acknowledged by the company. So that's where it starts, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'd agree with you. I think at the end of the day, employees, will have all this energy and they will want to be creative and innovative and want to do all these things. But if the organization doesn't support them, they're only going to go so far. Right. And so it's definitely something that I think organizations have to be the ones to step up to the plate, to create the opportunities, to be able to say, hey, managers, your employees are going to spend some time in these volunteer events and these ERGs, and that's okay. It is included and it's part of their work, so that they're not penalized at the end for, spending less time on something that they needed to do, not putting stuff in jeopardy. I mean, my organization would kill me if I say, yeah, it's okay to miss a deadline because you're working on an ERG. Yeah, you can't do that, right? Let's be real. You still got to meet your deadlines. But I think it's just being able to have the ability to say, but I can juggle and I can manage, and I'm not going to be looked down because I'm going to choose, rather than spending, my lunch sitting here at my desk or going out with my colleagues, I'm going to go work on my ERG stuff, and that's okay. It's being told that it's okay. It's accepted. It's fine. I have heard of so many employees in all the various companies I've worked at who I invite them to an event and they're like, no, I can't. My manager doesn't really gives me the time to do that. I'm like, what do you mean? Mm-hmm. It's a company event. It's a company event. What do you mean your manager doesn't support you? And that's the reality. There are managers that don't support that. So absolutely, companies must be behind it. They must support us, and they have to be intentional about telling their managers, especially the line managers, right? Middle managers, who are the ones that are really in that day-to-day aspect, making sure that they embrace this and that they're part of it. So, yes.
Yeah. Oh, I love you guys. You guys are amazing. I love everything you're saying. Our next audience question is, can you share if you've had an imposter syndrome experience during your career, and how comfortable did you feel sharing publicly about your intersectional identities early on in your career?
I mean, when haven't we had imposter syndrome? Right? I mean, that's the reality, right? I was just doing a podcast and we were talking about this, and it's like, look, I remember having imposter syndrome since forever, right? And do I think it's going to go away? Absolutely not. I think we're still going to encounter it. As much as we are confident and strong in what we believe, we still have those moments of doubt. And I'll share a quick experience. At this one organization, I was trying to go for this promotion, right? And I worked very hard. I had everything I needed to. I had spoken to multiple people in the organization. And so I sat down, I put together my nice little PowerPoint, my facts, everything you can imagine you need to have in there. I had it in there, including what the org should look like, what my short-term goals and long-term goals. Anyways, I sat down, I am getting ready to send this out. And I was like, oh my God, well, maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I haven't done enough. Maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I need to talk to a lot more people before I actually say that I'm ready for this. And I mean, it was real. It was real. I sat with that for a good week or 2 weeks before I actually sent that out. And I was talking to my brother, and he's like, what is the email? Open up that email, hit send. And I'm like, no, because I still got to think about it. I'm not sure. He's like, Enna, you are more than capable. You're already doing this role. How could you possibly be saying that you're not ready? And he's like, hit send. And he literally held my hand to push the button to hit the send button. But that's what it took. That's what it took. Because I still self-doubted. I just didn't believe, was I ready? Was I not ready? So yeah, imposter syndrome is real. It's still there. It's happened for a very long time, and honestly, it still happens today.
Totally. And actually, talk about multiple intersectionalities of your personality. As a woman, I think women in particular encounter this imposter syndrome all the time. We question ourselves. Are we ready? Should I do this? Should I speak up? Am I being too loud? Am I being too forceful? Maybe I should let so-and-so take the lead. Oh, well, I've talked already like 3 times. Maybe I need to shut up. And so this is augmented, this feeling of whether you're ready, whether you can do it when you're a woman, when you're a Latina, when you're LGBT, when you're Afro-Latino. So all of these different layers is like a layer in a cake. You have to work towards kind of moving them away. But Enna is absolutely right. It happens. It's real. And it's something that we have to confront every single day. It's not gonna go away. It is a thing that I'm glad that we're talking about it, that there is awareness. Sometimes I would ask my partner, is it too much? Am I being too much? As a woman, and I'm strong, I'm loud, so it's, I struggle with it. I think that as a woman and as a Latina, I struggle with it.
I couldn't agree with you more, Angela. Look, I walk into companies. I'm wearing my colors, as you can see my background here. I'm a very colorful person, so I walk in and I'm like, I'm Enna. I'm here. Hello.
Totally. Talk
and
about
all these people sit down and they just look at you like, okay.
But sometimes that reaction can also be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be here, right? Like that, their reaction to you, right, can also kind of then be like, oh, I was just being myself, but I don't know, everyone else is dressed this way or speaks this way. Maybe I should change a little bit. Maybe I don't belong here yet. Maybe they're not ready for this yet. That can impact how you feel, even in those very small scenarios. Maybe there's not a lot on the line in that scenario, but those kind of little interactions can add up.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
No.
Okay, so our fourth and final question before we have to move on is, how do we empower people to identify so that we can help get them involved? And are there any success stories?
That's a good one, because you're right. If people don't self-identify, how do you know, right? But it's really about engaging folks in conversation. So I know we only have a couple minutes left. I will say that, yes, I've been very successful in figuring out where people are from. And just because I engage them in a conversation, I start talking about where I'm from and what I'm doing. And then, as I share, then they share. That's actually recently just happened to me. I was on an IT call getting some help, and I'm talking to the gentleman, and I said something in Spanish, and he chuckled. And I was like, oh, I'm Latina. Did you understand what I just said? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. Where are you from? And so now all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know you were Latino. I had no idea. So yes, there are ways, but what I have found is you just have to engage people in conversations. And the more and more you do that, you will realize, and people will self-identify more and more. Well,
and that goes back to my example that I gave earlier about this gentleman who has an Anglo name, and he's finding his Latino identity through ERGs, right? That's a success story. It's letting people know it's okay. You all remember, back in the, 40s and even 50s, 60s, 70s here in this country, if you were Latina, if you were second or third generation, your parents dissuaded you or disencouraged you from speaking Spanish. Why? Because they were protecting you. They were protecting you from being discriminated against they were afraid that you were going to have an accent like they had an accent. And so for many of these kids who are now my age, in their 50s and 60s, a lot of these Latinos are not bilingual. And there is a sense of shame, a sense of embarrassment about that. But we need to be kind to ourselves and kind to each other and understand why that happened, right? And so now it's much more, the way that I see it is much more common for kids to, to throw in words in Spanish or whatever. And the culture is so much more open and rich, in music, in art, and social media. We see there is like a real melting pot. Whereas in the 70s and 80s, it was much more restricted or much more small, just because of the virtues of technology. So I think that just like Enna was saying, just being able to be comfortable with who you are and talking and sharing your experiences and finding linkages between you and the other person. People, they look at me and I'm very, I'm very femmy and, very female presenting, and they're like, they automatically assume that I am heterosexual. Mm-hmm. Immediately, they make this little story in their mind, right? Oh, this Latina, her husband is going to do this, or her children, or they start making una película, this whole idea of who I am, where I fit in. And I very quickly, dissuade them of any of those wrong ideas. And I talk about my wife, I talk about my partner, I talk about my children. And when people say, oh, your husband or whatever it may be, I correct them right away. No big explanations, nothing. I say, oh, I have a wife, and I move on. There is a time and a place to educate people. But, so I just feel like be honest and open and authentic on who you are, and that will help others be their best selves.
Well, speaking of time and place, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. But thank you guys both so much for, this amazing session. You guys are wonderful. But I will hand it back over to Sid now.
Thank you, Alida, for moderating a great panel. Thank you, Enna Jimenez and Angela Arboleda, for your authentic conversation on intersectionality and making sure that we do create an inclusive workplace for all of us. So with that, we will wrap up this session. And then our next session will be DE&I for an evolving workplace culture. It will be starting at 1:40 p.m. Eastern Time in about 3 minutes. All right, we'll see you there.